There is a space where you are all you need, where you are all you want. All there is here. Welcome to the Source Connection, conversations about who we truly are, the possibilities of creation and the new earth we are birthing, with your hosts, Tarah Long and Liz B.
Hi, everyone. Liz B here with my co-host Tarah Long and our very, very special guest, Andrew Kaufman. Let's just tune in a minute to this present time, sharing together here some silence and some breath. I would invite you to sit comfortably and feel your feet on the ground. And if you're lying down, just get cozy. Drop whatever you need to drop and just come into this now moment together. You can close your eyes. You can roll your shoulders back and open your heart. Let's just breathe long and deep. Take an inventory for what's happening internally in your physical, mental, emotional bodies. Just bring all of that together into this now. If your mind is racing, you can inhale and mentally vibrate loving, and exhale and mentally vibrate awareness. Dropping all expectations, all programs, all to-do lists, and just being right here, right now. If you wonder, bring the mind back to your breath and focus back to your breath. I'm just enjoying the last few moments here. Maybe a little deeper, a little longer, a little fuller. Let's take one deep inhale together and let's sigh out. When you're ready, open your eyes, stretch if you need to, or keep your eyes closed, whatever feels good. Thank you, Andy, for being here today with us.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Would you tell us what brought you to this now moment, sitting here together? A little bit of your story and what has unfolded for you.
Sure. I think it kind of goes back to a period in my life about 6 or 7 years ago when there was a couple of personal tragedies, if you will, that led me to look at things a little bit differently. And I had a friend who kind of urged me to look into some things with respect to the climate change issue. And so I kind of had this moment where there was a lot of grief and a lack of meaning in my life. And I kind of just adopted a challenge to try and disprove my friend's conclusions about that issue. And I kind of embarked upon this, searching journey, and what I found led me to realize that the narrative that I was taught and had put a lot of energy toward was actually not based in reality. In other words, the evidence wasn't there to support it. It was something that was manufactured for some other purpose. And so this kind of really created a major internal conflict for me and created kind of a dark void almost, because I began to look into other issues and found the same kind of pattern, and my worldview began to collapse. And at the same time, I had two influences in my life that really helped me look at that conflict from a spiritual perspective. And then one was my now ex-wife, who kind of pushed me to start a meditation practice. And then the same friend who had kind of challenged me on this issue also explained to me that it created this kind of divide, and that you had to pursue like self-development work and look at the bigger issues in order to keep the perspective and stop from becoming paranoid or depressed or reactionary or whatever other negative influence. And so that ultimately led me to discover a sort of spiritual advisor, Neil Kramer. And I began looking at his material, and at the same time I had already been studying meditation and had gone through several practices. Like I studied first mindfulness, and then metta meditation, and then Vedic meditation ultimately. And then once I began working individually with Neil, I also then began to study Western esoteric philosophy and spiritual philosophy, and then this started me on a self-development path. And it also coincided with my divorce, so there was just darkness from every angle, and it was like the phoenix burning up in the ashes and then reemerging anew, right? This kind of, now I see it as an alchemical transformation process. But this is what helped me prepare for, what I kind of feel was my destiny, which was to come out and be a voice of truth in the context of the pandemic. But had I not been on this journey, I wouldn't have been able to have the courage to do that or the willingness to take a risk, because I did end up really sacrificing my medical career in the sense of a licensed physician, as a result of taking that path. So I'm very grateful, for all of the circumstances and men and women who helped push me on that right path. And I think that's now, the inevitable conclusion of that realization of, what I view as my destiny is brought me to this moment. And now that I've helped uncover or, educate people about uncovering the lies and frauds around medicine and health and biology, I'm trying to now educate about what do we know that's true? What can you do to actually help your body, mind, and spirit heal, so that you can be and do everything that you want out of this embodiment of life.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, it's so important, as you talk about, Andy, the grounding during this time and the knowing ourselves. And like you said, it was a preparation for you, the tragedy to now. It was 8 years ago, you said. So really you've been on what we could call an awakening journey, if you will, for those 8 years, right? Unfolding. And it seems like it's brought you at least currently to what Liz and I were just looking at, which is the Alchemical Detox program, right? That's a fairly new iteration of your work, and it seems like it's a lot. It's like so much just in this beautifully, and it's not just detoxing the body, right? You talk about detoxing in all levels and all areas. So I mean, if you want to talk about that a little bit right now, it could be a good place.
Yeah, well, it's something that, so I began studying natural healing at some point, and I didn't really know what I was even studying, right? But I was consuming material from various practitioners in that field who had at least anecdotal success, and success is what I mean like individuals with serious illnesses, things like multiple sclerosis, for example, were, totally reversing that, which is, of course, unheard of in the mainstream medicine. And so I was just trying to find all of the procedures and all of the natural elements that contributed to those healing stories. And at some point, I realized that almost everything that I had cataloged that was successful was related to detoxification. So I began studying that in earnest, and it turns out that there's actually a lot of information from the mainstream biology and medical science to inform us on that practice, and but they're almost just sitting in denial that any of these things are important, even though they have many of the answers right before their eyes. And then as I was developing this into a curriculum, and I spent over a year collecting and organizing the information specifically for this course, because I wanted to stand alone that even someone who wants to be a professional health practitioner can develop mastery from this information, but I also wanted it to be approachable for a novice, that you could, take away all of the practical elements and do your own healing protocols. And as I was going through that, and then I began separately to look into the alchemical formulations and sciences, I realized that it was actually describing the process of going through this healing. And so it was a perfect way to help accentuate the change that you go about, because, alchemy is not, it's not like casting spells and doing magic. There are people maybe who try to do things like that with some of the knowledge, but it's really just another way of understanding nature, and it's compatible with all other religious philosophies. It's not an exclusive thing that you believe this way, and and many of the most famous alchemists were Christians, although this knowledge existed also in the East. So in the Arabic culture and in the Far Eastern cultures, they also have this sacred ancient knowledge. And so I help to bring this out as a way of helping you to understand how to go through this process. And as you pointed out, it's not simply a physical detox, because there are the three philosophies of alchemy, but they correspond, with the mind, body, and soul, or mind, body, and spirit, that we can all understand in our everyday lives. And I learned.
Oh, Andy, we lost you. He probably knows that.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean,
maybe you could try to go out and come back, or
no, I would stay. I think
no, not me, not us.
Yeah.
Okay, I think he came back.
Hang tight, listeners. Viewers.
Hang tight. We're not editing this out. You guys can hang with us.
Breaths.
That's right.
You can take a pad to write notes.
Yes, because I feel like
a lot of goodness that's going to come out of this, and a lot of precious nuggets.
Yes, I love the alchemy as a way to understand nature. So beautiful.
Yeah. Totally. Mm. Mm.
Mm, mm, mm,
Mm.
mm. Holding the space for you. Oh, he left. Okay, so he'll come back probably.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what happened. First time in 2 years.
Yeah, that is the first time that's happened, huh? Well, guys, take a moment to
enjoy yourselves, drink.
Sure.
Do nothing, just breathe, just be.
Yeah. We're just being together. Being together.
So many things we can talk about. What he was talking about, the integration of the mind, body, and spirit, whatever you want to call that. Because even in, I think, our last episode where we're talking about the enemas, and we're talking about healing crisis, and sometimes people lose perspective, right? That when you embark on something of that nature, there's so many layers to you that it just doesn't affect one. And how do you integrate the changes and the processes and all those layers that make you?
Yeah, and it reminds me of when people go on a weight loss journey. And I've heard, of course, a lot of
dramatic,
very dramatic. There's so much going on. It's not just you're losing weight, right? It's this entire process your whole self is going through. That's really magnificent.
Yeah.
We can slow down and just let it happen. Hello.
Hi, I'm terribly sorry about that.
Okay.
That's okay.
We're holding the space for you. So where were you?
Do you remember? I've talked.
No, I'm sorry. I got caught up in trying to troubleshoot my technical difficulties.
I'll cue you up. So, talking about alchemy as a process to understand nature, right? And also the multi-layers that we all encompass, not just the physical, but the mind and the spirit, and bridging that to create this, where you wanted people from all levels of understanding to be able to jump in and go through that process themselves, or help others going through the process.
Right. No, absolutely. And, in fact, whether you acknowledge you're going through this process, anytime you change anything, you're always going through at least part of this process. And even something as simple as making a cup of tea, you're doing alchemical processes, right? You're doing calcination to heat the water, and dissolution when you put the tea leaves in the water. So, and so I teach you how to apply that to your healing process. And I think what I was really getting at before was from my experience, even doing mainstream psychiatry, that I saw that, when people had psychological experiences that were adverse, like trauma, for example, that could directly affect their physical functioning. And when they had physical insults, right, which could, of course, also be physical trauma, but it could be other, processes of illness or disease that could induce psychological problems, and that both of these things had also an interaction with the spiritual, because it provided the context of the bigger picture of what's the purpose. And sometimes even specifically spiritual crises, like specifically existential crises, which are talked about extensively in psychology. Especially you look at authors like Irv Yalom, for example, and it's something even I was taught about at a mainstream residency at Duke University. So all of these things are in play in every case when you're talking about someone's health and well-being. And this is true, whether they feel that they're in good health but just would like to improve their vitality or their energy, all the way to people, who have a serious life-threatening illness. There's always all these components. And, interestingly, I heard an amazing story from another psychiatrist from Canada whom I met at a conference. And he developed one of the most unpleasant types of cancer in his around late 60s age, which is rectal cancer. Oof. And so of course he didn't want to go through the misery of having like radiation therapy and incontinence related to that, and so he resigned himself to either accepting his ultimate demise from the cancer or finding another way. And he realized that when he was at a formative age in his childhood, that there was a situation where his father publicly shamed him, and symbolically, although actually physically, kicked his butt right in front of people, like not hard enough to wound him, but to like ridicule him, essentially.
Yes.
So he, all these years later, 60 years later or whatever, made this connection as he was just gaining insight about his situation. And once he realized that cancer was caused by that kick in the butt 60 years earlier, he went through his own healing process, right, of psycho-spiritual healing, and ended up with no more cancer. So now I'm not saying that everyone can alleviate cancer in this specific way, but that in this situation we see how profound your experience outside of the physical can impact your your self in other dimensions.
Totally. It's so beautiful what you're doing, bridging that gap, and it's so needed. We would think that throughout all this time we really needed this big of a crisis to come forth in that way, right? To realize like, wow, we really need to integrate more. I remember.
Well, that's part really of the alchemical process, because you have to break things down. Right, and that is a partial destruction, right? It's like if you have a decrepit building that's unsafe and no longer functions, right? You have to demolish it before you can build a new structure to replace it. And the same thing is true with these change processes. So it's like you need to have that kind of dark and destructive and dissolving force in order to bring about the equal magnitude of a transition, a shift, and a transformation.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that how you were saying, it's really that spiritual component, I think, that really allows for that gap to open, to go, what's in this for me? What am I here to learn through this? Or what am I here to uncover or dissolve, like you were saying, and take responsibility? And
It's the counter position to the materialist, decadence position, right? Where there is no purpose in life. Once we are gone, then we're gone forever, right? And that you just have to basically pursue pleasure and individual, like ego-driven goals in order to maximize your experience. But of course, that's not the truth, but that is the cultural programming that we're exposed to. And when you come from that perspective, right, then you just want a shortcut. You want something that you don't want to go through difficulty, adversity. You don't want to experience your negative emotions fully and learn from them. You want to bypass them, cut them short, right? Get the quick fix, and then go on to more pleasure seeking, and which, of course, really destroys your abilities further, and will end up in a lot of disability. But that's the predominant paradigm that we have to overcome in order to achieve real peace, to get back in touch with nature and our relationship with it, and have a sense of meaning in our lives.
Yeah, it's bringing up that point of, we're so conditioned that we're just machines, right? And that our bodies respond and do certain things, and we have the system to fix or heal all these different pieces and parts of us. But doing the work, like you're talking about, this man who experienced a trauma when he was 6, and then 6 or something, and then when he was 60, finally it showed up. I mean, it probably showed up before, right? But this was the body's last ditch effort. It's like, hey, we need to look at this. So it's just doing that deep work. And I mean, Liz and I talk about this all the time. These past couple of years have just been so incredible, such an incredible opportunity for us to do that and to become our own gurus. So what I love about what you're doing, Andy, too, is because you said a lot of the language and this program that you're talking about is, you're finding your own way. So you're offering the information, and then people are tuning in and they're finding their own way.
That's a really key shift in the philosophy of how you approach health, because in our current culture, right, it's like it's someone else's responsibility to improve your health. And my philosophy, it's your responsibility. So, even when I work directly with an individual, I don't do anything. I just teach. I help them understand. I help them generate insight. I tell them things that they can't figure out on their own. But I just give them the information, and I say, here, this is what I think might be causing this, and here's some information about that, and then here are the things that people have been successful with doing, and here's why they're successful, and here's some more information, or here's someone else you can go to learn more. And then I expect them now, offer support, of course, and asking questions and helping problem solve, and we're working on actually bringing on a coach also to help people with some more practical and motivational aspects. But it's a total, shift, because the truth is that we can all attain enough knowledge to handle almost any basic health emergency or health situation. I shouldn't say emergency. It includes emergencies, but really any kind of situation. And we have to accept that in every case, what we did something to cause the health problem. Even if it wasn't intentional. And so we have to do something different to reverse that cause. And the materials that you would need to carry this out are very, very inexpensive and widely accessible. So it's not like you have to go and spend thousands of dollars to, either learn this material or to acquire, supplies that you'll need.
Right.
It's very accessible, but it's a matter of, helping people realize that that they're actually capable of doing this on their own, and that it's actually successful. When people do this. And we're doing some internal research right now to actually, quantify that to some degree. But we have already, amassed so many anecdotal stories, and not just from my work, but from many other people like Jennifer Daniels and Amanda Vollmer, and several others, that we know that people can have amazing results when they take this responsibility and they get inspired and motivated to make some changes in their life.
Yeah. Would you say that it's almost like they open themselves up to the possibility of that, therefore it is possible at some level?
Absolutely.
Or somebody needs to take care of me. I don't know how to do this. I didn't go to school for that. And all of a sudden it's this kind of going back to ourselves and going, what is my body trying to tell me? What is this emotion trying to teach me? What's going on in my internal landscape that I can tend to and process and go? And as you were saying, like a shift in almost like where we're looking at. And of course, having guides and people that have more experience in certain areas that can point. And I remember you talking about, this is a little while ago, about shifting your practice to where you wanted people to take that charge and that responsibility, and you wanted to be more of a guide, but not like, well, you need to do this or that. Like, okay, well, let's look at the options here and what's going on. And I wonder how much that has impacted, your clients and the former clients, and how much of that like lingered and stayed through your own alchemical process and your own relationship with your title of a doctor. And it's so pompous on the world that we live in, and how has that shifted for you or not?
Yeah, well, this is of course there's a growth and learning that occurs, including for me as I started to embark on this journey outside of the medical system and practicing as a licensed physician. And now I realize that not everyone is really ready to do this kind of work. And there's a stepwise process for people, because it is a major shift in how you think about health altogether. So most people start with either through direct experience or indirect experience, seeing the flaws of the allopathic health system. They've had bad outcomes for themselves or friends and family, and that opens them up to see that it's kind of really pervasive there. And then they start looking outside, but there are many, many traps, because there are many, people that are trying to take advantage, of others for a buck. And so a lot of people have the same exact model as the allopathic system, but they just call it something more natural sounding.
Yep.
Right. So there's a path that you have to go on. And then if you continue on it and realize that you can't rely on other people to guide you, you have to take the responsibility. And then you look for, people who are teaching that. And then people come to me. So there is some like self-screening that occurs. And, I don't just get general people that come to me and want to, do healing. It's people that are already of this mindset or they're on the way there. When I first started out, I thought, okay, maybe I'll just work with people locally. And so a couple of referrals, people looking for psychiatrists came, and I said, oh, are they willing to do natural healing? And a couple of them were. And what I realized is, though, that they really weren't. So there was one really almost tragic young man that I worked with, because he had what I thought to be the beginnings of schizophrenia. And went from, being a highly functional teenager to kind of just dropping off and being out of touch with things and being alone in the room and drinking too much and things like that. And originally they just did a dietary cleansing protocol and had amazing results. Essentially, like the parents said, "Oh, our son is back."
Mhm.
And then, I was like, you need to do something more definitive, because you can't maintain this diet. First of all, you'll get malnourished over time. And then also it's just, you'll face too many temptations. But he wasn't really willing. And I think there was some conflict in the family that they're like kind of skeptical of natural healing, even though he's got amazing results. And then he had a couple of slip ups with like having pizza and beer with his friends. And then boom, like the next day was like right back to where he was before the situation. Right. And ultimately they decided not to work with me. And it was really that they didn't want to use turpentine in the healing process, which at the time I felt was the thing that would yield the best results. And so they ended up going back to a regular psychiatrist and taking antipsychotic medications. And I'm sure that, that his life is not what it could have been, at this time. And so I realized that I had some other experiences like that, and that I had to be very, just a little bit more careful and selective, because I want people to benefit from working with me. I don't want to just, spend my time, make a buck, and then whatever happens, happens. Like I want them to have a real healing experience. And so that meant I had to be a little bit more careful. And I realized that if I work with an international group, that's a lot bigger population for there to be people who are of the right orientation and really ready, and that's worked out really well for me so far.
I love your story. I mean, I'm sad for the young man in your story, but of course we know we all have our journeys. But I'm curious, with psychiatry being your background, if you see value still in that system or the things that you've learned, and what if you use it today? Like, I'm sure you do, but like, what value do you see in that now?
Well, modern psychiatry is not really something that I see a value, because what it's really become is, and they call it even psychopharm or psychopharmacology, and they just go through this, really unvalidated list of criteria from the special manual of diagnoses, and then match it to medicines, and then when those medicines don't work, they just add on medicines for other mental illnesses and say that it's, that they're doing something sophisticated. And it doesn't result in anything good. But what was part of psychiatry and still is in some pockets, and I actually specifically sought out training opportunities where they taught this curriculum, which is, psychotherapy in general, but real psychotherapy, like really learning specific modalities of psychotherapy, not just being a therapist that says, "Oh, how was your week? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that," And so in studying that, and here's what really benefited me was when we had these direct observation setups in my training. So like sometimes I would just videotape a session, and then my supervisor or the group would review it afterwards. But other times we actually had this one clinic set up where there was a therapy room where we're doing couples and family therapy, and there was a one-way mirror. And then there was this bug in the ear device. That wasn't the bug. There was a special phone. It was a direct line, like the bat phone, And so there would be like the supervisor and then a peer team in the observation room. And if they really needed to direct the student therapist, they could use the special phone to like call them in and say, stop saying that, or or try this. But what was the routine was that they were making an audio tape, and the supervisor, who was a very experienced therapist, was adding in comments on the same tape, so that you, as the student therapist, you take this home and you'd listen to it and you'd hear the comments in real time. And then you could hone your skills really quickly. And what you learned was you learned the skills of developing a rapport and a relationship with a stranger and creating the context to allow them to spill their guts about the most personal and intimate issues to you. And that, there were several skills involved in that, like validation, summarizing, summary statements, reflections, a lot of different things that help you develop this, kind of comfort in the individual, that it's a safe space, that you're really listening and paying attention, right? That they're being heard for the first time, and that they can talk about things that they maybe can't talk to their wife about easily, or their children. And so those are terribly important skills. And then even therapeutic skills to help people realize their toxic patterns and the mistakes that they compulsively repeat over and over again. And that principle, even the Freudian principles are true to life, like the repetition compulsion, where, someone keeps doing the same thing and it's working for them on one level, but it's also sabotaging them on another level, right? But they can't get out of it until they generate the insight about it. So there are things like that about how to do skillful confrontations that are really helped me in my current role. And then, of course, what I learned in my forensic specialty was really, really helpful. Being able to sift through large bodies of information and find pertinent clues or pieces of data to speak to some issue. And then, of course, what I learned about critically appraising scientific literature, medical studies, and other studies like that has really, really helped me. But the specific knowledge of, this and that, depression and anxiety and PTSD, it's much, it's pretty obvious. So your life is screwed up, you lost your job, you can't pay the bills, your wife hates you, you're depressed, right? Of course, we know what that is.
Obviously.
Well, yeah. Oh my God. Wait, I thought about something. I was curious. That's a question I was curious about. What drawed you to forensic psychiatry? Like in the midst of, if you can summarize that, because that's something I always wanted to ask. But before you say that, I just want to say, that's what I was thinking. How good you are at bridging that when you talked about the scientific papers and all of that. And I take such pleasure. You really awakened the nerd in me that I didn't know I had. And I say that in the most loving way, because I really enjoy listening to you and Cal and just really breaking it down and reminding me that I have the capacity to understand, and I just need to put forth the effort, right? So all the allegoric works and all the things that the words and the things that they use, just to remember, and that's a process that I did before even all of this, looking into shots and all of that. And it was good to reawaken that side of just like, wow, we're all capable of this.
Science is actually really fascinating. But, I think the scientific establishment wants to keep it to themselves. They don't want anyone looking in. They don't want anyone realizing that half the time they're fudging their experiments or drawing erroneous conclusions. They want the monopoly. So much of this is because of the organizational structure of all of these establishments. It's true in the educational system, in the medical system, right? And what you have is a hierarchical system, but it's segregated. So, right, in medicine, we chop this up by body parts, right? Like you're a cardiologist and you only know what other cardiologists know, but that rheumatologist in a separate wing, you don't know what is going on in their world. And this, of course, helps you from realizing overarching themes. It's because everything is compartmentalized like that. So for me, the forensic aspect, really what first got me interested in it was just that I really love a good argument and debate. And I've, found it as a challenge. Like I really enjoyed doing model Congress when I was in high school, which is, really where you have bills proposed and you get there and debate with other people on the floor of the House or the Senate. And so it gave me that opportunity, and it really helped me, obviously, with how the work I've done over the last couple of years, but it also not just in developing those forensic research skills, but also in understanding the legal system, and that justice is not really the central goal of our current modern legal system. There is a part of it that that can meter justice, but in general, it's astonishing to know that judges and lawyers don't even know the law that they're arguing much of the time. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you for bridging that gap in such a beautiful and unique way. And your voice has been really important. So yeah.
I when you said, you're really drawn to an argument, or you really like that, right? Which is why forensics degree, I'm like, oh, that makes sense then why you were drawn to this terrain versus germ, because I say that jokingly, but
this Socratic process, right, it's vital to get to the truth of things, right? It's like if you look at the philosophy of science, right, every theory that or hypothesis has to be falsifiable, right? There has to be that argument and that competition, or almost, not a competition to see who's the best, but a competition to see what the truth is. And you can never be sure that something is true without that.
Right.
So simple. And here we are. And wow. Yeah. Which I love that we're here. We've taken a while to get here, but we're here.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Well, and I'd love to hear you just talk a little bit about like terrain, and not necessarily just what it is, but what's underneath that for you. Like what really drew you to this? Because you did the movie Terrain, and you've really put so much of yourself into it. And so what is that about for you? What is your why there?
It's very simple. It's about nature. It's just that I'm a being in nature, and now I lived much of my life in a concrete jungle, regrettably so. But I just started looking at nature, and this is what I see, how things work in nature, both with the naked eye and under the microscope, as above, so below. And it fit right in with all of my observations about how people recover from illness using natural methods involving detoxification, that it's actually the contamination and human alteration of the natural environment or the terrain that's the problem. And that the natural elements can actually solve this problem all on their own if we simply stop causing the problem.
It's so simple, isn't it?
Everyone, it's so simple. It's so simple. And I think that more and more people are starting to understand that and grasp just the simplicity of that, and bridging all of that together, even the way we look at illnesses, as we were speaking before. What is it trying to tell me? How have I created this, right? What parts of myself are in disharmony or have maybe self-trauma, abuse?
And what even is illness, and what is just a natural cycle? Like when we observe right now this time of year, we're in the northern hemisphere, we see the leaves turning color and starting to fall off the trees. So do we call that, tree alopecia? Right? Premature arboreous baldness. We don't see that as a disease, right? But what in ourselves, what is like the leaves falling off the trees, and what is really an illness that is affecting our body in a deleterious way?
Yes.
Right.
So beautiful. Yeah.
And it's all, I mean, which we talk about here all the time, it's all for us, and there actually isn't anything wrong. Our body is pointing us to something, and we may need to shift or change, to go through some sort of detoxification. But if we can, I know for me, that's been so helpful. I used to be an acupuncturist, and, even that was still trying to fix something in a way. I mean, in a natural way, of getting the chi flowing and all of that. A lot. It's a great tool. I still think that, but yeah, it's so much has shifted for me, and now it's just so helpful. And whether it's dis-ease in the physical body or in the mind or in the emotions, what is it for? It's for something. If we can just slow down and be with it. And I'm curious, Andy, if you want to share more of your story about this transition for you, this kind of awakening, which seems like maybe it was a slower process. I don't know. You said there was a tragedy, was that like a quick kind of, oh my gosh, like awakening moment, or was it slower, or what was that like for you?
No, there was, I mean, it kind of built up a little bit slowly. Like it was actually first I had, I'm a little bit almost embarrassed to say this, but I thought at the time, the first time Bernie Sanders ran for president, that he was really going to do some things that were really good if he were in office. And so the first thing is when I realized at the Democratic convention that summer how he was like just pushed out, right, in a unfair, behind the scenes kind of way, that kind of shocked me to see, this is the reality of how politics works. And then a few months later, my only brother, passed away from a drug overdose. And so it was, there was obviously a period of just grief, but then it was like, it seemed everything was just open and upside down in my life. Yeah. Everything was in question. And that's when I said, all right, I'm going to just open up to a different viewpoint, or I'm going to because I really, when I did that, I was trying to prove that I was correct, and was almost like to validate the old me before experiencing these tragic events. And, what I saw is that, no, there was no turning back, that I only had to look forward. And then that turned into a very rapid change for me personally. I went through quite a lot of transformation during that time. And then just, another couple of years later, again, going through the divorce. So it was a lengthy process, but it's really a lifelong process for me now, because I haven't stopped. And I think we go through periods where we have more accelerated development, because we have to be ready to go through that next round of work, and we can always do things gradually on an ongoing basis. But so I feel like I've been through two of those very profound episodes of transformation. And I feel a third one coming on. I'm kind of resisting it a little bit, but I know it's soon.
We're all here together. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your vulnerability and opening up like that, and and honoring that part of yourself. Now, my question or comment, question. How do you feel the courage inside to do what you do? And looking back when this first started, and as you said, the sacrifice of your license and, maybe relationships and things that were well established in your world. When you look back at that and you feel yourself now, what is that courage like for you? Do you feel natural sitting at it? Do you feel like you have moments or...
Well, it doesn't really even feel like courage anymore, because, looking back, because I really prepared myself to speak against the mainstream and, speak against many of my peers. And so I knew that it would put those relationships and that career and those affiliations at risk. And so what I did was I just got to a point where I realized that those things didn't serve me in their current embodiments. And that if, let's say, a relationship I had with someone, if they were able to move on with me into a more truthful embodiment, then that would be amazing, an amazing outcome. But that if they weren't, that it was actually going to hold me back to maintain those ties. And so when I actually did that and I experienced that separation from people and things, it was almost a relief that I didn't have the burden of pretending to live that way anymore, that I could be honest about my experience of learning more truthful things, and that I could, keep the door open, that anyone who wanted to come on board and explore that with me was welcome, but if they weren't, that I wish them well and allow them to, stay where they were while I moved on. And that was just where I was at. It had to be that way because I'm very, very strongly motivated by justice. And at that time in the world, I immediately saw injustice everywhere. And so, I had to serve that part of me to be true to myself. And it almost, any of the consequences of that were just serving that pursuit of truth and justice. And I was able to let go of the attachments to those other things. And the biggest thing that I was fearful of when that happened was, am I going to be able to continue to provide the resources for my family?
Yeah.
But I had faith that I had experience, and that things would just work out okay. And when it happened, and I called upon some of my fellows to give advice and support, I just had an immediate tremendous response that everyone wanted to offer me support and advice, and that when I opened up my consultations to the people who I had been, trying to educate, that they all signed up right away, and I was able to just make a smooth transition, even though without any planning. And I was a bit disorganized even from at the beginning. It took a while to make it a well-oiled machine, but I was really blessed, and I have observed so many other people when they get to that point and they have that courage to take the risk, that when they have the right intention and the right motivation, which just means doing it for a good moral reason, to benefit and contribute to the world and humanity that we experience, that things are going to actually work out just fine for you, how they're supposed to.
Yes. And we'll link up the amazing things that you're doing, with True Medicine University. And I mean, there's so much good that has come out of that. And also what you were saying, organizing all of that, it created something that you could offer to everyone, which is really beautiful. And I really have to say that I just love the designs and the layouts, and it's really thought of, and you really feel that bridging of all of it. It's not just one thing, it's everything coming together. It's very multi-layered for me personally. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we were really, and I really have to thank some of my team members for this, because I have, two amazing artists that I work with, and I have other folks who they really looked at this material from the point of view of what it would be like being a student, because sometimes, I try to be very conscious of this, but I can maybe, use some of that scientific language
Yeah.
and things like that. And we wanted to make sure that, so we had to put in like a list of vocabulary words that, and, give places to, a link for a medical dictionary, right, and things like that, to make sure that as you're going through it, no matter what level that you're at when you start the course, that the resources are there for you to catch up to a higher level of understanding through your own effort. And so making sure we have all of those materials like in place and in a way that is user friendly, right, that you could just pick up open up this document and say, oh, it's obvious how to use this. And it tells me where to find everything, right? That kind of thing, to give a good experience. And the same thing with, the way that I did the lectures there, like it's not like this PowerPoint Zoom style, right? It's like I'm the professor in a classroom with a whiteboard, right? Because I'm actually now, I'm not just exposing you to something, right? Like this interview, right? We can only go so deep because we want to, right, cover a lot of topics and say, inspire people to look further.
Right.
But that course, right, that's teaching you this core material, this core syllabus. And so I get into that teacher mode. And so that you look at me when you're learning these concepts, and then all the materials that I reference, they're all there for you at your leisure to go through in detail, in full length. And then there's even resources for beyond the expert level, that if you want to take it to the next step, right, here are the books and articles you can read.
Yeah.
And we're going to link everything up so people can find that. And anybody who engages with that course, I can only imagine the blessings for them. Andy, our last question that we like to ask people is, in the past couple of years in your search, well, I know it's been more than a few years, but in your search for truth, what have you learned about yourself?
Many, many, many things. Like one thing is that, and this really doesn't just apply to me, but if you just pursue your passion and try to do it to the best of your ability, that it will have a influence beyond your expectations. And you may not realize this all the time. Sometimes in the digital age, right, people look, oh, how many views did I get, or things like that. But it doesn't matter, because you can feel it, that what you're doing, if what you're doing is really important, that it will have that impact. Even if no one else directly knows about it, it will still act through, morphic resonance or through the Akasha, however you want to look at it. It will bring a positive effect out there. And so when I embark upon things, I try to focus my energy on that. And, learning that truism has really helped provide a lot of motivation and clarity to how I do things.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Thank you
glad
so
to have
much.
you in this journey.
Thanks for being here today. We've enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, it was really a nice kind of discussion.
Thanks, Andy,
for listening and being here. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time, everyone.